Thank you everyone for joining today. It's wonderful to see you all again in yet another episode of Societal Chats. Without further ado, I'm just going to show a small video. It's more like a going down memory lane to see what has happened in the last 11 months, who all came and spoke. So a quick video here for you all. Just give me a minute to share my screen.
We added them all up and sort of take the same approach to the problem on the ground. How long do you think we will take to solve the problem? And the number came to like 30,000 years. And
we're not trying to patch anything. We're actually trying to build something in such a way that that it could be built for scale.
We have never really built stuff for people who want to contribute and contribute meaningfully at scale.
If you cannot connect with someone at a core emotional sort of human level, it's actually impossible to affect change.
I think the biggest thing that happened was a common shared vision among the new leadership that we need to pivot.
So we are an analog government. Our thinking and mentality is one of scarcity, where the digital possibilities and these concepts are not yet muscle memory for us.
Internet, content, people can come together at scale. Many of those scarce resources, what we consider scarce, and that were roadblocks, can become abundant. When it becomes abundant, it creates great opportunities.
What works now is not going to work a year from now when we are trying to support 200 million people.
The idea that sometimes the form leads to expansion of purpose, where you can use a shared infrastructure to solve problems which you can't even possibly imagine now and at scale.
So you have to build solutions which are designed to give disproportionate power to the poor.
How do we enable others to work on top of what we have done? Because it's only when that happens can you actually start to build solutions.
So shall we begin this one? This is going to be a very exciting societal chat, and if I may share my screen. Thank you all for joining. Like I always say, this is the most interesting evening of every month for me, because this is when I get to talk to some of the most people from whom I've learned the most. So today we are here on episode 12. This is the penultimate episode of this series, where we get to talk to some of the amazing leaders in the development sector space who are reimagining speed, who are reimagining scale, who are reimagining sustainability, and are on very inspiring journeys. Today is a special day because today we will expand this discussion to saying, how do you come together to do this, right? So today is not a one-on-one chat, but a chat with three leaders who are going to talk to us as to how they came together to address some of these interesting. So let me introduce them. On the call, we have Deepika Kinhal. Welcome, Deepika. And Deepika is the team lead and senior resident fellow at Vidhi Legal. She's on multiple expert committees of Supreme Court of India, Niti Aayog, adjunct faculty at Mount Carmel College in Bangalore. Her passion areas are improving India's justice delivery systems, legal researcher, judicial reform activist, understanding systemic issues and intersection of law and technology. She's a trained Carnatic singer, that's for another day, with a brief stint at All India Radio and in Kannada movies. And so this is, welcome to this discussion, Deepika, and we look forward to learning from you today evening.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. I look forward to learning too.
Thank you. Also, we have Sachin with us, Sachin Malhan. Sachin is the co-founder of Agami, whose tagline goes as ideas that serve justice. He is also co-founder and CEO of HumLab. He was the executive director of Ashoka Changemakers. Many of the Ashoka Changemakers are here on the call, so I'm assuming that you already know each other from your past. Co-founder and chief Planeteer Inclusive Planet. He's co-founder and CEO of Rainmaker, co-founder and CEO of Law School Tutorials. And if my memory serves me right, Law School Tutorials went on to become a case study at the Indian School of Business. His passion is in incubating ideas, design thinking, team building, fundraising, working with youth, leveraging technology in creative ways. So that's a very inspiring combination. Welcome to the discussion today, Sachin.
Thank you all. If my internet is a bit patchy, I'm in Brazil, in rural Brazil. So please bear with me, everybody. But lovely to be here. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. On the call, we also have with us, it's my internet patchy time, I guess. Surya Prakash BS. Surya is fellow and program director at DAKSH. He has a history in accounting. So he was the tax controversy lead in the Asia Pacific and Japan region for IBM, vice president at ICICI Venture, manager taxation at Hewlett Packard, chartered accountant and a law graduate. His passion is in judicial management, judicial administration, technology for the judiciary, and taxation. Welcome to this discussion, Surya.
Thanks, Sanjay. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. So that brings us all together now to open up the floor for a conversation. This promises to be an interesting evening. This is not a panel discussion. This is a chat. So we are going to just have a great time chit-chatting with each other. And on the audience today, we have the Ashoka Fellows who join us from the Aspire program and few of the other representatives of the societal platform missions. And so welcome everyone to this discussion. To open up the floor, what I would like to certainly invite my fellow partners in crime today to share a bit about their journey, but also the interesting part of today's conversation is 3 organizations and actually more. So Agami and Vidhi Legal and DAKSH coming together to deal with a complex area like judicial administration. And so typically we talk to social entrepreneurs who are using societal thinking to see what they can do with their mission. Here, 3 of you coming together from very diverse backgrounds. So I think it would be good to start, and probably we can start with Deepika. What were you doing individually before this in this area, and what brought you together to co-create with each other? Why did you come together?
Sure. Thanks, Sanjay. What was I doing before this? It seems like a long time ago, but not really. It was just 5 years ago. But what a journey it has been. Before this, I was a practicing advocate. I practiced before various legal fora in Bangalore, ranging from consumer courts to the High Court. And what brought me to law and policy domain, and specifically to judicial reforms, is mostly the frustrations that I experienced on a daily basis while dealing with courts, while dealing with judiciary as a system. I think wanted to understand what was happening behind the scenes, which was manifesting itself in the form of repeated adjournments, delays, and of course, pendency, all the well-known problems with the judiciary. So we often hear about it and we experience it as stakeholders, as active participants within the system, but we don't really understand why these problems exist. So I think that is where my interest in judicial reforms as area of focus started. And Vidhi gave me the platform to truly deep dive and explore that area. And that is at an individual level. I think at an organizational level, Vidhi started its journey in 2013. And all of us are mostly lawyers at Vidhi. We were, I think, driven by the same curiosity, which is to understand how the institution is functioning. And the overall objective was to bridge the gap in knowledge and understanding. What makes the judiciary? What are its problems and why do these problems exist? We wanted to answer these questions through in-depth quality research. And I think that is what we did in the initial phase of our journey as a law and policy organization. It was as much about informing ourselves through our work. We wanted to understand at the first level, and then go to the system to say, these are the measures you could perhaps take. This was what we did for the first 5 to 6 years, produce research reports centered around data that had begun to emerge with respect to the judiciary, thanks to eCourts project. And I think once we did that to a fair extent, where we were confident to say that we now understand what is happening with the judiciary, we then started to look out for partners, because we did not want our knowledge to remain restricted to the paper. We just didn't want to produce report after report, which we did plenty of. We have produced around 40 reports discovering various aspects of the judiciary, starting from its budgeting to its recruitment to infrastructure. Truly, if we look at the breadth of the reports we have produced, I think it gives a good overall understanding of what makes the judiciary. But then after understanding it, what is the next step? We need to bring solutions to the judiciary. It is not just to understand and keep on deep diving into these various aspects. We want to improve the system, and that is why we are there. I think personally, my first experience with collaboration was with DAKSH. We collaborated way back in 2018 on a report looking at how Bangalore rural courts function, and it was intended to be a series of reports understanding litigation landscape in Bangalore. So we wanted to take advantage of proximity in location, like-mindedness, and truly the journey that we have sort of gone through together until then. And that is how, that collaboration truly helped us understand the value of co-creating and going on this journey together, because the resources are limited, be it with respect to people who are interested in this or with respect to funding. So it only makes sense that we work together, be it in terms of research or in terms of co-creating solutions. And that is how I think we started our journey in collaboration. And since 2018, we have entered into multiple partnerships, and it is only going to grow, because that is the only way to serve this area.
Thanks, Deepika. Let me switch the frame to Sachin. Sachin, you and Supriya, who's not on the call today, I think you guys had played a very pivotal role in forming this coalition around the judicial platform thinking, right? So would love to hear what was your journey? How did you reach this point saying this is what we should be looking at?
Yeah, Supriya and I both, I think, owe a lot to Ashoka, because between 2010 to about 2017, we were immersed in that world. She was here in India, I was in Washington, DC, and that world really played a big part in making us, in kind of shaping the way we looked at what the opportunities were. Because before that, I had been an entrepreneur, and I had a certain entrepreneur lens to everything. Okay, here's the problem, how can we solve it? Creativity, inspiration. And I think the Ashoka experience helped me realize that there are very different ways of doing things. It helped me, I think, first and foremost, understand that often there's latent leadership potential in communities and networks that goes undiscovered. And it also really showed me the power of networks and ecosystems, and I think those things sort of came together with my earlier interest in, innovation and entrepreneurship. And it really sort of led Supriya and I Supriya was having very similar exposure because she had been a practicing lawyer till the time she joined Ashoka. I had no such benefit. I've only practiced the law for 1 year. So I came into the legal thinking as a complete novice,
Right.
But I think that really important thing was having this love for wanting to see a changed experience of justice in the country, this interest in it, and yet having the sort of innocence of not knowing how systems really work here. And I think that combination was really important because it meant that we came in and we said, okay, there are some wonderful organizations leading on the policy side, wonderful organizations leading on the institutional engagement side. Where's the social innovation? Where's the ecosystem thinking around unlocking capacities of different actors and getting past our conventional understanding of the system? Because there was a prevailing narrative of the system being the courts, the lawyers, the judges, and that innovation would happen by their own leap to the next level. But that sort of was not consistent in that sort of hid a little bit of the real power that we had seen in other parts of the world and in other areas where the role of citizens, the role of social innovators, the role of leaders in different domains that were not typically engaged in the formal system was undervalued. And when we started Agami, I think the idea was, given the fact that there's already so much competence and leadership around areas like policy, areas like formal institutional work, could we bring in that lens of changemaker thinking? The idea that there is a role for a lot more people that could potentially disrupt the system, and that there could be a theory of change, if one may put it like that, which built on top of the idea that the answer lies with the government only, and the government must now introduce a better system. Like, is there a theory of change bigger than that? Because 1.3 billion people, it just seemed like we could risk falling into the trap of better system will solve all problems. And in other parts of the world, wiser people than us had looked at us and said, that is flawed. It doesn't work like that. And in India, it just looked like, how could that just be the answer, right? So I think we're perpetually on that quest. And so to your question, Sanjay, about leading us to that, I think the first thing was, as we started working in this area, the first thing was recognizing the leadership that was already there, recognizing the competence of people who were already doing fantastic work. And whether it is Vidhi or DAKSH, we knew that work. We knew how good it was. So I think for us, the first thing was, how can we be of value here, bringing this new lens, at the same time amplifying and supporting the work of those who do it fantastically well from their domains? What does that look like? And who are the other leaders who we need to bring in to that conversation? So I think that was our approach from the beginning, that this work is only collaborative. It is because of the nature of the problem that we're seeking to solve. And it was not always easy, because you're trying to develop a language for how do you work together. You're trying to understand your role. But I think today we have that bridge of relationships that allow us to build on it.
Thank you for that, Sachin. And it's been such an inspiring journey over the last 24 months to see all of you kind of come together and forge the way forward, starting from very, very rudimentary basic discussions to something fairly sophisticated. And Surya, you have been also intensely engaged in this whole process. So would love to get your perspective on where do you come from. I know that you were working on judicial administration for a long time before this all came together. So how did you get woven in, and what's the magic that's happening now?
Yeah, I think before we started engaging with the idea of platform thinking, DAKSH had the tough task of laying the road out for others to say, come join this journey. So in that sense, the work that DAKSH did was a bit tough, because we were trying to, in all humility, trying to understand what was happening, and figuring out that that it is a tough problem. And just like how Sachin mentioned, the system thinking, right? There's a system entity outside. We are at the fringes. We are searching for leverage points. We're searching for entry points to get in and bring in that magical change, right? Where is that unlocking key? Where is that magic potion? So that is what there was a humility, and there was a seeking of entry and leverage points. And it was also a tough period before we came to this kind of thinking, that there is a balance that needs to be achieved, especially in the justice sector, especially in a country like India, with all its complexities and dynamics, that the formal justice system does play a role. The formal justice system is aspirational, has its value to the citizens, and there is a clamor for people to access it. In such a situation, in such a complex scenario, how do you really deploy something like a platform thinking? Because the work that we had shown, a lot of national surveys showed that people's trust in the system had not was not the greatest, but the need was there, right? The latent need was there. So when we say we are trying to empower citizens, in what ways are we trying to empower them? In a justice system, when you say you're empowering them to get justice, that can mean not so great things when right? So this realization that it is not a system, that you're a part of it, that there are ways of making sure people feel that they can contribute to this building of our ecosystem, that was really the way we changed our thinking, Sanjay. And yeah, all the long discussions that we had, searching for those clues, I mean, still remember a lot of them.
Let me bring this back to Sachin. In the middle of all this, the pandemic sets in, and obviously the justice system then goes through a very important flux. So, and it was during this period where a lot happened. So give us a sense of what happened, what opened the window, how did you actually respond to that situation?
So I think what's important for everyone to understand is that the pandemic has not just accelerated the thinking on how do we reimagine our formal court system. It is not just that. That has happened for sure in a big way. I think there was an urgency, there was a willingness of different different institutional leaders to kind of be open to ideas. So there is a entire kind of conversation to be had on the dynamics that changed, which led to the collaboration on, say, the e-courts committee and the more formal stuff, the stuff that was being led by the Supreme Court committee on what could be the design of the future court system. But I think what's really interesting to also consider is that that the pandemic also accelerated a whole bunch of other things. And I think all of it was stemming from this realization that, wow, the scale of the problem is so huge that if the system is anyway servicing a small, the formal system is anyway servicing a small portion of that problem. I mean, I think even DAKSH's own work, I think right in the early years, came out with that data point that 8 out of 10 or 8.5 out of 10 justice needs never come to the courts. But that is the level of trust deficit, or even a sense that there may not be a solution there. That is the significant nature of the problem. But I think it became clear to everybody that, nobody individually had the solution. There is such a big crisis. The courts shut down. When they came back up, they were dealing with only a fraction of issues. And in general, there was this sense of, helplessness, right? And I think that led to a lot of leadership emerging. So if you look at one area where it burst through was, of course, the collaboration on the formal design of the courts, the whole digital courts pathway, where Vidhi, DAKSH, Agami have been working together with the Supreme Court e-courts committee. But aside from that, a whole bunch of other work, for instance, work on public-private partnerships around the Lok Adalats, which are the small causes courts. And that has led to a whole number of them being done, being digitized through public-private partnerships. And I think the numbers run into 500,000 disputes being onboarded onto online platforms in these public-private partnerships between the legal services authorities and the private providers of those technologies, online dispute resolution providers. So that's another area. And a third area was where the legal services authorities, in India, the legal services authorities, for those who are not familiar, deal with the provision of legal aid, the free legal aid that most Indians, over 1 billion Indians, are entitled to. They started looking at public-private partnerships and exploring solutions that they wouldn't have explored earlier. So what you started seeing was two things. One is the pandemic led to an urgency and a willingness, but it also did something really interesting. It led to a recognition that the ideas will come from unexpected places. And the ideas are not the ideas of us sitting down in a room and saying, here's a better idea. Right. We are immersed in an environment of ideas. You know what Amit Verma always says, right? He loves to say, politics is culture, is downstream of culture. He loves to quote that. I love that term, politics is downstream of culture. It was the recognition, I think, in the governance world, that there's a culture of innovation and we can take from that. It is not that it is another part of the world, that it will function on its own regardless of what government is doing. So I think what is really interesting, Sanjay, it led to another pathway for change. The pathway for change is that when governance is immersed in a culture of innovation and enough leaders exist in different spaces, then the chance of onboarding those innovations and making them successful becomes that much more. So I think that from our vantage point, what we've seen is a forced systems convening, if I may use that term, if people are familiar with that term, a forced systems convening. Of course, many people have played roles in that, but where people have come together and shared ideas and stepped into another level of leadership, saying, yeah, I'm keen to do this. Have you got a way in which I can do this? And that is really, really interesting. And I think that will hold us in good stead over and above a specific solution being implemented. That is a cultural change. And I hope that that cultural change deepens and widens over the next few years. We shouldn't get distracted by a single point of success, but more like, hey, there's many people now who can innovate together.
Right. That's a fascinating development, or a fascinating narrative. And in the middle of all this, Deepika, I wanted to hear your perspective that all of you decide to come together and get into this bubbling, boiling, experimentative space, whereas all of you come from well-established, procedurized, processed organizations, and now you're in this, we don't know what e-courts would lead to, what kind of new thinking platforms. We're talking of architecture and design principles, and so what's going on in your head, and what made you all sort of click together? Would we love to get your lens on it? So what happened? Why did you, because you could have gone, seen this and said, no, this is not for me. Let me get back to what I was doing. Right? Why did you jump in?
That's a great question, Sachin. Brings back quite a few interesting memories from that phase. To carry on from what Sachin was saying, right, regarding what changed really during the pandemic, I think it was mostly this huge appetite for change that emerged out of nowhere within the judiciary. We had been dealing with the judiciary for quite a few years, and as with Surya and DAKSH as an organization, we were trying to find those entry points, very difficult to come by. But with the pandemic, here was an opportunity where the judiciary was welcoming us, unprecedented, would not have happened in decades. We could see that they wanted solutions, and this time, thankfully, they were humble enough to look outside. So we wanted to obviously be involved in some shape or form and help the system in whatever capacity we can. However, we were also equally humble to know that it is not something that a bunch of us within Vidhi or within the judicial reform space can do overnight. And that was the kind of exigencies of the time, right? We wanted solutions, and we wanted solutions quickly. We realized that while we come with it with good intent, wanting to serve, we did not have the capacity. We do not have capacity in terms of numbers. We do not have the capacity in terms of required knowledge to truly see what the changed system would look like. What would it require to sustain beyond that emergency situation? While we did embark initially on that path independently, we came out with a report on virtual courts, and we were consulting with you and others at AkeStep to figure out what can be done. And truly, that was helpful. That was eye-opening. However, beyond that, how do we take this to the system in a manner where we are convinced that what we are saying actually makes sense? And that can happen only if we engage with people within the system who will actually implement it, right? The judges, the registry officials, the technology offices that already are a part of the judiciary. Without that kind of engagement, whatever you may write on paper is futile. Everything that you say in theory needs to be tested, especially when it comes to a mammoth system like the judiciary. And hence that engagement was critical. And here one must acknowledge the role played by Agami. They were critical in bringing together active participants like us, like DAKSH, and so many others who were involved initially in brainstorming, just understanding what can be done, and then taking it to the system, ensuring that that appetite for change that is created finds an avenue to actually explore and experiment together. I think that role really helped. So that appetite for change plus the role played by Agami and all of us wanting to help in collaboration with each other, not just within the legal community, but beyond. So I think that is what truly created the magic that happened last year. And I think since then, it has been a great learning experience. As you said, there were so many new concepts. I identify myself as a legal researcher. So I didn't know S of systems thinking. I didn't know about these design thinking. So I had to learn quickly. My team had to like burn midnight oil to ensure that we understand the concepts really well before we back those ideas. Those ideas have been tested in other systems, but for the judiciary, it is entirely new. And for us at an individual level, it was a huge learning experience, but it was also a huge experiment. Should we put our name behind this idea? The number of sessions we have had trying to understand what platform thinking is. Does that work for the judiciary? So it was a lot of back and forth, but I think overall the openness really helped. The openness at our end to learn and relearn and unlearn the concepts that we were sort of attached to. Right. A lot of humility and the change that the judiciary itself wanted to initiate.
Thanks for that, Deepika. And quick reaction from Surya before we open the floor for a couple of audience questions. But while all of this is happening, fast forward, you reach a point where all the work that you've done gets constructed into a vision for a judicial platform for India. And it gets launched by the highest level of the judicial system in the country for public consultation, right? The skeptic in you through all of this is like platform thinking, judicial, is this going to happen, not going to happen? So what's going on in your mind while all this is progressing? And the reality is that it finally did get out for public consultation. But in the process, what was going on in your head?
Well, so Sanjay, clearly it was a leap of faith. So, and the realization that what has been the approach so far is not going to work if we want to scale up a system for population level. Once we realize that what has been done so far is not the way ahead, then you look for other things that have been done which have been successful. And I mean, we didn't have to go too far. I mean, all our conversations, and to be very honest, we did have, while this opportunity was brewing, DAKSH did put out a few papers on what we thought was platform thinking, and we put it out. But then we got deeper into this and all our conversations, and we realized that, it's actually much more than what we had thought about initially. So the realization that it is an information ecosystem, and the doubt, yes, there were a lot of internal conversations, and Deepika is alluding to those internal conversations, convincing people to say, yes, platform thinking can make a difference. It can empower current stakeholders. It can dramatically change the lives of participants in the processes and citizens, right? So it's definitely a leap of faith, but with the confidence that what you're doing will have an impact, but also be prepared for tough conversations with people who have not yet been convinced about it, being willing to patiently listen to their viewpoints, tell them what this new vision is, and just be with them, with the process. I mean, without being judgmental, and say, okay, I know what you're saying, but I have this, we have seen this as a larger vision. So can you stay with me for 2 more minutes? Okay, I know what you're saying, but you know what? This is what is enabled here. Right? This is the customization possible. This is the configuration possible. This is the local language tools that are possible. This is the subject matter wise tools that are possible. So I think patience and being with them, alive and open to those conversations. I mean, not just internally, even within the judiciary, we've had many a conversation where this was required. So that's, yeah, I would say that.
Thank you, Surya, for that. So I'm going to shift gears with this and over to Sachin. One of the central tenets of societal thinking is the idea of restoring agency. In a system which is like the judiciary, how does this concept even apply? How does this idea even apply? Restoring agency. What does it mean? It's a formal system, different actors, citizens at large. So what is your lens on this idea of agency in this context?
There is, of course, the conversation to be had on agency within the formal system. But I also feel like when the formal system starts to say, how can we bring platform thinking inside, societal thinking inside, then I think that the formal system is also saying, is admitting that there is a much larger system, which is not the formal system, which is the broader system by which people relate to law and justice, right? So Sanjay, my thing is that if the question we frame is that agency inside the formal system, there's a conversation to be had there, about the role of everybody, whether it's a lawyer or it's a paralegal or it's a low level staff member, or there is a conversation to be had there, and we will have it. But I do want to also flag the huge question around the role of 1.3 billion people in securing justice, in realizing justice outcomes. I do want to flag here the concern that I have that if we say that we want to bring in platform thinking into the formal system, then the idea then is that the formal system enables everything or enables justice outcomes at a very large level. It may not even be by serving its classic role of providing a decision. It may be by providing data. It may be by providing information, literacy. So the point is, we have to look at it then in the context of a broader agency issue. The agency of ordinary people insofar as realizing a justice outcome for themselves. If we don't do that, and we still know that only 1 in 10 people go to a formal system, then something is wrong with we're not recognizing the really big revolution here.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Sanjay. You were saying, sorry.
I was just saying that you make a very important point, that it's important for us to recognize agency at 2 levels. One is agency of the formal system and the role that formal system plays in restoring the agency of the society at large.
Exactly.
I think that's a very important distinction. And I think the question also then boils down to saying, how do you serve justice in the formal system?
Yes.
And how do you use that to create a just society, which is the larger agency of the system, right? So I think and it's true for so many other fields, right? Whether it's education or healthcare or ecological conservation, is agency of the system and the role of the system in restoring the agency of the larger environment around it.
And then Booker Fellow, wonderful person who you all would know, Raj Jaydev, who runs who began the participatory defense movement. I think some of the other fellows, Silicon Valley Debug is the name of his organization. And in that is a beautiful example, which is in that he had to work with the formal system for the public prosecutors to recognize that the families of incarcerated men of color, young men of color, could play a role in defending their family members by providing letters of good conduct, by providing that they had no background in crime. And usually these people were being arrested for narcotics, right? Why do young men of color be arrested in the US? And what he had to do was he had to make sure that the formal system, the public prosecutor, enabled the family members or were supported to enable the family members of the accused to actually gather evidence and make representations. But the big innovation was on the social side of how he organized the communities of the family members so that they could defend themselves. And if you ask him, he always defines himself as being a community organizer. I mean, this is one of the biggest criminal defense movements in the US, and he defines himself as a community organizer. So what I think what we have in front of us is this phenomenal 1 decade, 2 decade long process by which all of us can be open to the idea that people who haven't played a role in securing justice or in contributing to creating justice outcomes can play a role. What does that look like, and what does the formal system have to do to be open to that? Okay. So I think that, again, without walking away from your very specific question on the agency inside the formal system and actors inside the formal system, which the system must, of course, enable, I think my excitement comes from the role we all can play to unlock a different set of roles that, frankly, how are you going to solve 1.3 billion people, millions of justice needs, 9 out of 10 not going to court, power structures? How are you going to do that unless and until you are prepared to unleash that level of agency?
Well said, Sachin. And I would certainly urge the participants to read the link document that was posted by Naveen in the chat, because a lot of this thinking has gone into creating that vision for the digital courts for India and looking into the future. I'd like to pass on the conversation to Surya and would love to get his perspective on, when doing this, what were some of the boundaries of the existing thinking that you had to push, that you had to break? Like Sachin was elaborating on agency, what were some of the other boundaries that you would have seen in the past, but in this process of preparing, for example, even in the areas of governance, or how do you measure success? And so would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, that I was about to mention governance, my pet area there, in that area. So the big idea that we had to tackle was There is somebody who's designing, and there is somebody who will implement, and there is somebody who will just use it, right? This top-down approach to the system, and which is not just technological, because it will mean the changing of lives of users and citizens. That that is the thing that we had to unlearn. That is the idea that we had to fight against. That, you know, it's not just somebody sitting on top. Everybody, all of us, could become contributors to this process, contributors to this system design. All of us are empowered to do it. This model allows you to do that. That is the thing that we had to constantly battle in our conversations, to say it's not one person. Now, that requires a different type of governance, and you rightly mentioned both governance and measuring of success, the network effects of all of these solutions going viral. So those were real hard challenges that I don't know, and I'm being cautiously optimistic here to say that while we have made progress in the idea, there is still much to be done, right? There is still a lot to be done. And that is where we are going to face up to the real world of structures and power thing that Sachin mentioned, right? All of those fault lines that make up our society as it is today, we will come in contact with them. And there's a battle ahead is even more, and we need to double up and work together to make sure that we're contributing to the solutioning, because you are really unleashing and actually giving up power. It's some sort of a renunciation, if you almost can imagine that happening.
Thanks for that, Surya. We have a few minutes left. What I would like to now shift to is you as leaders, because, you know, on this call and all the many other societal platform thinkers, this is not only a transformation at one level of what to do with the system in the ecosystem. That's what we talked about, right? Saying, okay, the judiciary, the extrajudiciary, etc., etc. It's also about you yourself as an individual, to grapple with this transformation, to grapple with this change, your role coming into a coalition, letting go, working from the back end. There's so many things that happen, right? So I would love to get 2 minutes to 3 minutes from each of you on what happened to you in this journey. Last 24 months, what all have you learned? What have been your personal shifts? What are the pivots that you had to make? What was normal, natural, easy, and what was extremely difficult? Lots to be answered in a few minutes, but would love to learn from you. So probably I'll request Deepika to begin.
I was hoping you would not, but it's, as I said, quite a journey these last 2 years. Overall, it's been positive, because just before the pandemic hit, I was lost, as in I had an existential crisis about what I was doing with my life. And, you know, because I had already invested around 4 years in this space. And as we have discussed here, it is extremely difficult to engage with the judiciary and find those opportunities to create true impact. And as a law and policy researcher, that is what you're looking for. You just don't want to keep churning out reports for the sake of it. And well, pandemic happens to be an opportunity in several sectors, and it came as a blessing for the judiciary as well, given that without it, I think it would have taken us decades to be where we are, at least in terms of thinking. So this, for me, I think has ensured that I stay on this path in the long term. Before this, the thinking was that, you know, nothing is going to ever change. Let me just go back to a law firm or continue to practice, because in any case, I have to deal with the system as it exists. So for me, I think personally, pandemic and the opportunities that it has thrown up for a researcher like myself and my team is that we continue on this path. And yes, there have been a lot of, I think, explorations that are happening at an individual level. in terms of understanding what we don't know, what are the limitations to our capacity as a lawyer. This is at an individual level, and I think I can speak for the entire legal community when I say this, that we now accept that we don't hold all the solutions or even an iota of solution when it comes to systems problems. And this is also translating into how the judiciary is looking at itself. It knows that it needs to look outward for solutions to emerge. So I think with this, I have started speaking to experts from so many other different domains. The learning has been immense. So I'm slowly pivoting out of my comfort zone, which is desk-based research, looking at precedents, something that Prasanna was talking about. Precedents-based system is what we are used to. We look at past judgments and then we infer what the future judgments might be like. But here we don't have precedents. This is something entirely new that we are trying to think about and create for the justice system. And I think it is going to be an exciting journey.
Thank you, Deepika. Let's listen to Surya and then to Sachin.
So, Sanjay, I think it was a dramatic transformation. I don't think I can mince any words there. To think of silos, to think of people trying to solve population scale problems by themselves, sitting in their. I think the need to work with others, the need to think of ecosystems, to unlearn the limitations of legacy systems. I mean, it was a huge personal journey for me the last 2-3 years that we have been thinking on these lines. It involved a lot of conversations with myself. I think these conversations with myself are a very strong component of this transformation, the stories that I tell myself, and therefore what you convey to others. So I would say that spending time with the problem, spending time with how you view the problem and how you think platform thinking or societal thinking can affect your view of the solutioning is an important part of arriving at your conversations with others. I would urge more of us to dwell more on this.
Thank you for making that space for all of us to have conversation with ourselves in this journey, because there's a lot of deep introspection required as we go down this path. So thank you for bringing that up. Sachin, we would love to hear from you at 2 levels. One is Sachin and the second is Agami. So tell us what happened.
I think for Agami, our role has become clearer to us. The fact that it is our role. It is not only Agami playing this role, but this is the role we want to play for ourselves, to bring, when you hear Deepika, Surya, to really be able to create the space to bring in more Deepikas and Suryas, and to also support their best leadership, their full potential. Like if we can have 1,001, because in India, you always add one. If we can have 1,001 Deepikas and Suryas of, again, very wide range. Could be someone in small town Bihar who has figured out an amazing model for widowed women to meet their property rights. But if you can have 1,001, say by 2025, people who think like that, including inside government, including inside the judiciary. So you're not trying to separate this out and say this is civil sector, this is business, this is government. If you can have 1,001, hopefully that number is more. That is a leadership culture that will percolate into so many things. So one is from Agami's point of view, seeing our role to constantly find such people, to support them in their journeys, to co-create with them in areas sometimes when there are gaps and nobody is willing to jump in, and somebody needs to jump in and do something, and that by the way, Sanjay, can be very challenging, right? Because sometimes we have people then will see us as a kind of a facilitator, but then if you jump in and innovate, then, oh, you're innovating, like, hey, somebody else should. So we are going between convener and innovator. It's a
Right.
tension.
Right.
You're making bets on ideas. It's a tension because somebody's saying, why not? Why this idea? Why not that idea? It's okay. And I think that leads to the personal part, Sanjay, which is, how can we live with this conflict and tension and collaboration without the preparation on the inside to do that? It'll eat you up alive. First, if you have to have the capacity to hold space, if you have to have the capacity to navigate conflict, if you have to have the capacity to innovate in situations like that, you better be ready for it. You better be personally, deeply, internally ready for it. So I think for all of us, recognizing a part of this is the knowledge, a part of this is the experience, but a large part of this, Sanjay, is the gardening mindset, jo hona hai, abhi, I want to be a part of kya hona hai, I want to facilitate that. I need to be ready on the inside. I need to have done the inner work to allow for that, so that I'm not responding to stray emotions, or I'm not, which I will, but I'm not as a pattern responding to things that are going against this kind of broader approach of ours,
Thank you for that. The idea that one needs to hold the space and allow both outside and inside for things to emerge. Wow, those were some fascinating learning. I would love to hear the reflex from you. The core values of societal platform thinking are woven around agency, dignity, and choice. And I think what you are attempting to bring to a population of more than 1 billion people is an infrastructure that can be fundamental to how we practice agency, dignity, and choice in a society as large as India. The stakes are high, and the issue is very complex. So give us, what is your wish for 2022? Given that we are winding up the year and starting a new year, what's your wish for 2022? Sorry about no pressure, a lot of weight on your shoulders, but what's your wish for 2022?
On a lighter note, the immediate wish is that the vision document gets published, officially gets adopted by the E-committee. That is the first practical hurdle we face.
Right.
I think I'll just pick up from what Sachin, the brilliant point that he made about how bringing in. I hope in 2022, more people adopt this approach in their plans and projects and steps, minor steps, right? So just getting more people, I completely agree with him. That would be a great success for 2022.
And I think just going from that, Sanjay, in a recent conversation, you said that we need to hear a lot more people's from the heartland, from speaking the local languages, representing communities that are really represent the bulk of India. I think that my wish is that in 2022 we can find a significant number of people who are there. It's not that they are not there. They need to be brought into these conversations. Somehow they need to be put into positions where their leadership can be spotlighted. I think that otherwise there's a real danger of, again, having that whole India versus Bharat problem in the whole law and justice innovation challenge in front of us.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Deepika, Sachin, and Surya, for sharing your insights, for being so generous with your time today. We have learned a lot, and these learnings are recorded, and all the participants and many more would listen to the wisdom of today over the year to come. I wish you all an amazing year ahead. So happy holidays, and thank you for giving us that theme that may the coming year be an year where we work with everybody and leverage their agency to change the system that we want to see. So I think thank you so much for that. All the very best to everyone on the call. Have a fantastic 2022. See you soon. Bye.